The potential of this skill set that we call communication is only limited by the scarcity of the environment that it resides in. We are in our third lesson of our communication series, which is really exciting. The last lesson we had was around confidence. This lesson today, and we're going to get started around competence. Two kind of go together. I want to share something that I became aware of as I was thinking about how to bring this conversation together. And what I came up with is that you can't influence where you can't communicate. In order to influence, to pour into people, you have to be able to communicate effectively. And communication being the substratum, the foundation of everything when it comes to having impact on people, is very influential in delivering results. But that all starts with intention. And as I was thinking about this, I've been reading the book of Genesis like over and over and over again, because often my mentors always refer to Genesis in the beginning, and the beginning was the word. Now, as I was reading, what I pulled out of it, and as you already know, all the species that God created, we are the only ones of his creation that receive the gift of communication. That's really interesting. So it's so important, but it's so underrated. He gave us that gift so we have the ability to communicate clearly and succinctly, and to create and to have skills in which we're able to dominate in order to serve people well. We're an extension of who he is. And so it allows us to be more impactful. He said, God said, let there be. I think about what we do often. When we say things, say, let there be this amazing program. And he said it in such a succinct way, but one thing that he knew is every time he said, let there be light, or, let there be seed-bearing plants and animals, seeds after its own kind, he always said it was good. And I think that one thing that we don't give ourselves credit for is the things that we create, we don't think that they're good. Being impactful, you may say, well, how is this impactful? Well, one, it's impactful in the effectiveness of our presentations. It's impactful in the effectiveness of our program, but most importantly, the effectiveness of all the levels of relationships that we come in contact with on a regular basis, meaning social, personal, and professional. So many people who are not searching to develop this skill of communication so they can be more aware in how their message to other people. And as a result, I really do themselves stuck in a certain realm of life, and they feel like that's what makes them feel like they're stuck. This skill set that we call communication is only limited by the scarcity of the environment that it resides in. You have to think about that for a moment, because most of the times we spend a lot of time in our lives in certain environments, and we don't become aware when that environment has expired in having the ability to serve us well. People find themselves not wanting to liberate that potential of communication to an environment that's beyond what's familiar to them. What ends up happening, our identities of what's possible never get an opportunity to become. We never get an opportunity to become a person who can do things in order to have all that we were meant to have. I have these conversations with people, the words hit me in a different, say the word static. What does static reflect to you? When things get stagnant, you know, you don't even want to be around it anymore. Just think about water, for example. When it sits for so long and it's not moving, it begins to stink, and it doesn't smell good. So I need to get this out of, like, I need to put some movement in there. And so as a result, that's what made me really think about this whole physics idea of Newton's law of motion. And there's two parts to that. It's the law of inertia and the law of momentum. And so in a static environment, you're talking about the law of inertia, which an object at rest, meaning the skill set at rest, will remain at rest until it's acted upon by an unequal force. And what is that unequal force? What does that unequal force look like? Intentionally immerse yourself in those types of environment. And it may not be people in what you read. It may be in what you listen to. It may be a movie or something like that, because what I found myself doing lately, there's certain movies that I love that I can sit and I can watch it over and over and over again. And I had to find out, why do I like this movie so much? So lately what I've been doing is rewatching these movies and to pull out the principle in the movie that really has me drawn to this movie, and to pull out that principle and put it in my information management system. Principle could be around something like inspiration. It could be around something like motivation. It could be around knowledge, but to pull that out so I can use that when I begin to have conversations with people that they would be more familiar with. I may not personally have stories, but I can bet you for sure most people have seen, like a movie I was watching the other night was Coach Carter, how a coach is able to bring out the best in you for you to become a champion. You may think you're a champion now, but you're doing everything wrong. Your behaviors are not where you need to be. And it's a coach who can pull that. Trying to really immerse myself in different dynamic environments that will allow me to continue to grow in the way that I am able to effectively communicate with people, as opposed to being the law of momentum. So the law of momentum is just the opposite, right? An object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by an unequal force. And so when you hear dynamic, some of the words that you may think about are what? You're more potent, like you can have a greater impact. And so, and the unequal force in this case, and this happens in reverse as well, the unequal force in this case would be becoming comfortable. And this is an amazing part for me. It's becoming comfortable with a level that you have become familiar with, and not being aware that you're not being fed by that environment anymore. And so that's going to impact your law of momentum. So the unequal force in this case with the law of momentum, if you're growing, the unequal force is now back to being static. Mm-hmm. Static slows down. That's the unequal force that hits the law of momentum. Very important as we begin to grow to become effective speakers in our marketplace. Dominance and communications come from, to dominate like this tool set of communication, it comes from a dynamic engagement with abundant content to be competent. A dominance in communication comes from dynamic engagement with abundant content to be competent. That was introduction. Heard our conversation about the competent speaker. Because what's for sure, and this is what my mentors share with me, you can't execute something right if you're understanding it wrong. Working definition of competence as I see it. And that is having the necessary ability, knowledge, or skill to do something successfully. So let me open that up a little bit. So it's not enough to say, I have the necessary ability, knowledge, and skills to do something. It's going to bring about results that you want to bring about. We don't give ourselves enough. Let it be and know that it's good. And one more thing is, when I think about a message that I heard a couple of weeks ago, often if God said, let it constantly referring to things as being good, that's what we settle for. When in actuality, we were meant to be great, because results follow energy. So if you're only saying and you believing that your conviction about self is good, you can only be good and you can only serve average people. Words that are coming out of your mouth. The first thing that you have to have a revelation about is, what is the outcome? What is the outcome you're trying to deliver? And I thought about, for me and what I'm trying to do with everything that I do, all the programs that I put together, I want to bring about a transformation from mediocrity in every area of one's life, whether that be in relationships, whether that be in speaking, physical health and or communication, one's mindset, to transcend the experience of being average, of being mediocre. I want to annihilate mediocrity from people's life. I want to help guide them through that. I focus on their potential, their purpose, and prosperity. The prosperity is important because I think everyone's skill can be monetized. And everyone is not living up to their full potential. There's so much more. I think everybody should have at least a hook on what their purpose is. And to be able to monetize that, because we are creatures meant to be fruitful and multiply. That's why P3 even exists. Confidence is going to be an outcome of your competence. Let's talk about it based on the rooms in which we find ourselves in. Because the rooms in which we find ourselves in will give us different degrees of context. So we could be in a large room or a small room. So we're talking about like rooms that we find ourselves in. You may also be in a context of doing webinars, which is going to give you a different level of context as it relates to how confident you are. And your competence is key and critical to delivering the results based on the transformation that you're trying to give them. That's why it's so important to most times get information of the makeup, the context of the people who are going to be in a room, so you know how to deliver the intended transformation that you want to. So everything you do is about delivering transformation. What is the solution that they're walking away with? And to make that transformational mechanisms in order to drive the point home, there's a lot clearer based on how you align that transformational mechanism up with what they're familiar with. I spent 12 years in college, aside from the years in preliminary and secondary school. And the instructors in this space, and we'll call that space the classroom, it's not that they weren't knowledgeable, because they were. They were knowledgeable, but the things that they had to say, sometimes for me, they weren't able to say it well. So I became disconnected and my mind started going other places, which is not blaming them, but that's why I couldn't focus and I became bored. And that resulted in me graduating at the bottom 33% of my high school class. Not saying anything was wrong with their knowledge, but the ability to say it well is a whole nother conversation. It matters. And just like we talked about the law of motion, that's where that comes in. We have to continuously, like, even though we are knowledgeable, but we have to continuously immerse ourselves in environments where we can experience unbalanced forces that allows us to grow dynamically, becoming more competent for speaking well. You say, well, what does this have to do with me, Dr. Marnita? This is what it has to do with you, because I talk to a lot of people and they don't realize how important this is for them, because there is life-altering and life transformation information education and expertise and insight inside of you that it has value for so many other people. There are several areas in which this can occur. This can occur in our everyday relationships with people that we come in contact with. Mm-hmm. This can come if you're raising kids, or if you have any type of interaction with kids. This is, Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership. People really to execute on the things that you share with them. But if it's not shared with them in an effective way, what ends up happening, they don't end up executing on the call to actions that you give them. What I hope to do is to talk about some of the things on how we develop something to say, and 2, how to say it. The second part we're going to cover next week on how to say it well. Today, I want to focus on how to develop something to say. So today, what we're looking at is content creation. Hello, I am Dr. Marnita on Fire from P3 Purposepreneur. And I really hope you enjoyed this conversation today from our P3 Speakers Program. It was just the introduction. We didn't even get to I didn't even share the real meat of the conversation, but hopefully you found some value in it. I am having an amazing time, and this is so rewarding to me. I have really been thinking about where does these thoughts come from? And thoughts for me are things. I need to say that again. Thoughts for me are things, but they're just not only things. Thoughts work. Depending on your perspective is going to determine how well they work. Thoughts are they work. And one thing I know for sure, I was thinking about this. I don't think thoughts can be taught, but they run through your life like a thread of gold. And your life will bear fruit 100-fold according to your perspective about your thought. So think about that as you move forward, especially with analyzing and thinking about how you execute based on the thoughts that you inherently have, whether you want them or not. They are inherent in your very being. So if you know that they work well for you, depending on your perspective, then your life will become evidence of the work that your thoughts produce. I am Dr. Marnita on Fire with P3 Purposepreneur, and I will see you in the next video.